ואני רוצה בינתיים להעביר את המיקרופון לברנרדין דורן, שתדבר באיזשהו חיבור בין העבר להווה, בין ארצות הברית לכאן.
Hi everybody, I'm really happy to be here. And I'm looking forward to when we sit in a circle and have a discussion, because I actually came here with 16 law students who are taking a human rights course on issues in Israel-Palestine to learn, and I know that I have a lot to learn from you. So this is accidental happening. And I'll just use a few minutes of time to talk about how I and the network of people I work with out of Chicago see the world today. I'm happy to talk about the past. I have a long past. I'm old, I have a long past, and I'm happy to talk about it, but I consider myself an activist in the present, and so you can ask anything and we can talk about anything after this, but I'd rather kind of try to name our moment, because I feel like our strategy comes from trying to identify where we are, both globally and in the countries that we find ourselves in. So I'm part of a network in Chicago called the Movement Reimagining Change, and we've been in existence for several years now, when it first became clear, actually, that Barack Obama was going to run for president, because we knew that one of the things that would happen if his campaign took off as it did was that it would take a lot of the organizing energy that goes into substantive and radical organizing in the United States and push it into electoral politics in a more and more and more narrow focus as the campaign went on. And so our idea was to try to recognize that and know that we weren't going to stop it, but also to realize that he was likely to throw a lot of people, particularly young people, into political organizing for the first time, and that it was an opportunity to kind of have a bigger umbrella and a framework in which to promote organizing. And in fact, it is kind of an extraordinary thing that not only do we have the first African American president of the United States, and a changing of the generations, if you will, in the presidency, but also somebody who was indeed a community organizer, who knocked on doors, who listened to people's problems, who organized campaigns and activities around changing social policy, and who knows that change comes from below. And that's, on some level, knows that. And that's kind of, we can talk about the last year and a half and the disappointments and so on. But I wanted to tell you what I think is the framework in which we see a movement reimagining change, ARC we call it, sees the particular political moment. The United States is, as you know, probably 4.6% of the world's people, but controls still 50% of the world's wealth, and has a military that spends more than every other country in the world combined. And so I think that we see this moment, I particularly see this political moment, as a moment that's very dangerous, as well as filled with some opportunities and some promise, which is to say that the United States is a declining global economic power, obviously still very powerful, but no longer a unipower, even now, and definitely over the course of this century, on the decline as a dominant economic power, or as a sole dominant economic power. Similarly, I think a declining political power. We could debate that, but I think the hypocrisy and the credibility of the U.S. as a peace-loving democracy is pretty shattered in the world, and so I think the political power is also declining. What isn't declining, of course, is the military power. And I think it will be quite a while before the United States is into unipower around military dominance. And as you know from the 20th century, that's a dangerous combination, to have a declining economic and political power, but an overwhelmingly dominant military power. And I think the national security state that we've seen organized in the United States since 9/11 in rapid, unbelievably rapid way, which owes itself in no small part to Israel, I'll say, is, I think, a particular thing. And we could talk about how quickly and how rapidly after 9/11 they had 500-page, the Bush administration had 500-page pieces of legislation ready to go in Congress, and how quickly these pieces of legislation were passed. So let me just say, I want to focus on two things, but I want to mention a few other things so you'll know both where I'm coming from and also what I think are the most important issues. Into this declining power, of course, comes the economic crisis of a year and a half ago now, which is, it seems that here it's somewhat shielded from it. But in the United States, it's catastrophic for millions and millions, tens of millions of people. And it's extremely dangerous. We have got millions of people out of work, and of course every aspect of the way the impact of the economic crisis is hitting is defined by race, primarily by race and ethnicity, as everything is in the United States. So you have a U.S. military empire arming the world. Half of our income tax dollars in the United States, of everybody's tax dollars, goes to the military, half. And so you have an incredible operating empire. And under the Obama administration, we've gone from 2 wars in Iraq and Afghanistan to 4 wars, really, with Pakistan and now Yemen coming into this part of the world, broadly defined. And I think it's just happened. You know, these are not declared wars, but in fact boundaries are crossed, and regular bombing attacks and U.S. military presence on the ground is just taken for granted. So we have that whole question of empire and wars, I think, is the overarching defining issue for anybody organizing around any issue inside the United States. You cannot fight for health care or fight for educational rights or fight for women's rights or LGBT or, I think, or living wage or any other kind of issue, and there are a lot of issues and there's a lot of organizing going on, without taking into account this unbelievably overarching military empire and both its decline and its ferocity. Because I think in its decline it won't be pretty. It will be, what does Randy Newman say, the end of empire is messy at best, and this will be like all the rest. So, you know, I think it will be ferocious and horrible.